They will grow anywhere in the world. And they're so prolific. Those of us who are charged with destroying them, we go cut them down or pull them up by the roots or spray poison on them. And by the way, poison all those campesinos that are growing them too, but we don't seem to worry about that because they're third world. But the point is, we got to go back every year and do it all over again because these plants just pop right back up. So because they are so prolific, they have zero value until we say they're illegal. And that's when marijuana becomes worth more than gold. Heroin is worth more than plutonium. Heroin is probably the most expensive commodity on the face of the earth, only because it's illegal. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Were you suspicious of the drug war when you started, or did you kind of push on gradually?
Okay, the question was, did I understand that the drug war wasn't working from the start, or did I catch on gradually? I got on very gradually. I grew up in Wichita, Kansas, where we didn't have a drug problem, I thought. Because to me, the people with the drug problem are the people who might stick a joint in their mouth on Friday night when they're out of school and off work for 2 days. But of course, I had a lot of drug problems. I used to get falling down drunk with all my buddies when I was 14 years old, about once a week. And I smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day for 15 years. We just didn't call that drug. That's exactly what they are. When I went to the state police, I was trained to think anybody that uses drugs is the scum of the earth. They're people who would kill you just as soon as look at you. That's what we trained. We were trained to go to war. Now that's a horrible metaphor, at least in a democratic society. Because when you're trained to go to war, you have to have an enemy, and the enemy becomes everybody but you. So, 1970, I went undercover, and 3 years, I was out there 14 years, but 3 years into undercover work, I had this sort of epiphany. It suddenly occurred to me one day that I liked the people that I was working on more than the people I was working for. And that was really an epiphany. And then I started realizing the only difference between them and me was they wanted to put something in their body I didn't want to put in mine. Look what I put in mine, Jack Daniels. You can't do much worse than that.
Where were the people that were alive at the alcohol prohibition when all of a sudden we started prohibiting like all these other drugs? Was there anybody standing up saying, hey, this messed us up before, why are we doing it again? Did you really hear about those people that would have been really fervently against anything like this?
Well, you don't run into them, but we run into them at LEAP. LEAP is basically a speakers group. We got 67 speakers now, and we speak to civic, professional, religious, and education organizations. These are very conservative groups. We also speak at retirement homes, and we talk to people, exactly the people you're talking about. People who actually live under prohibition of alcohol. And they just shake their heads and say, didn't anybody learn anything? They agree with us completely. And the reason they agree completely is prohibition is the same no matter what the drug is. Some of you have coffee cups here. I love to speak about this in Eastern Europe because I point out to the folks when I'm talking there that for possessing that cup of coffee in 1550, you would have had your head cut off. It was a capital offense, coffee. So there's no rhyme or reason whatsoever to which drugs we say are going to be illegal. You know? The 2 worst drugs known to humans, tobacco and alcohol, are both legal. Tobacco kills 430,000 people a year still. In this country, 5 million they estimate around the world. Alcohol kills 85,000 in this country, not by getting drunk and running off the road. It's a poison. It eats holes in your liver, it eats holes in your brain, and eventually it'll kill you. All the illegal drugs combined kills about 12,000 people a year in this country. And we maintain that that doesn't have to happen because people don't die of an overdose, for instance, of heroin because they shoot more and more dope. They die because they don't know how much that little package of powder is really the drug and how much the cutting is. Too much drug and you're dead. It's like Russian roulette without a gun. And in an illegal, unregulated market, it is impossible to tell what's in that package. And the same exact thing happened under alcohol prohibition. You know, people will tell you that, well, at least we had less people drinking under prohibition. Not so. Not even close. Go back and look at the stats. And the simple way to look at it is see how many saloons we had in the big cities then. Like, for instance, in New York City, the year that we declared alcohol prohibition, we had 15,000 saloons. 5 years into alcohol prohibition, we had 32,000 speakeasies. So apparently, a few more people were drinking. And not only were they drinking, but they were drinking hard liquor. You know, those saloons sold mainly beer and a little wine. The speakeasies sold almost exclusively hard liquor. And it's because of prohibition, because it didn't take smugglers long to figure out, hey, it's hard to smuggle in a whole barrel of beer, but you know, it's very easy to smuggle in a bottle of booze. Yes, ma'am.
No, I'm just studying.
Can you speak up?
I'm studying food policy at the moment, so I just read an article last week, and they were saying that the average American drinker was consuming 1.5 pints of whiskey a day. So it was like, and I forgot what president was that called it. I mean, it was a big problem. Everybody was drinking whiskey all day long, and that, like, at jobs, the coffee break would be, you have a whiskey at work. You have it going to work, you have it back. So that's why when you mentioned like the 2% that was using drugs at the time, I don't think that was using alcohol. That's why
Was this under prohibition or before prohibition?
I'm sure that worked.
And I'm sure that if you look back and see who's saying that, see who they're paid for to say that. You know, we got the drug warriors today say a lot of things that just aren't so. Like John Walters, he used to just make up facts on the spur of the moment. Just right in front of the camera, we just make them up. And I'm sure a lot of that stuff happened back there. But I think if you really look into this, you'll find that, no, that alcohol was not that bad a thing back then as far as use. And again, it had a lot to do with racism. It had to do with when they were deciding to do this, a bunch of not so white folks came over from Italy or Ireland, and they decided, these are different than us Americans, who back then were all English and German up in this part of the world. And the Italians love their wine, and the Irish love their beer. And they decided, we'll just make this illegal, and we'll be able to not just deal with alcohol, but we'll be able to deal with these ethnic groups that we don't care about. Yes, sir.
I've heard something about Henry Ford when he was making his Model T. He had based it on using alcohol as a fuel because you can get a lot more energy out of alcohol than out of fossil fuels. But then the Rockefeller drug laws and stuff like that was really what pushed for alcohol prohibition, because they didn't want people using alcohol to run their cars. They wanted them to be using fossil fuels with what they made their money on. I mean, that may be just like urban legend or anything, but that's just what I've heard. I was just kind of curious.
I don't know anything about it. It sounds like it might be. Yeah, there's even Mike.
Yeah, so I was wondering if you could talk about the thin blue line, the silence held by a lot of police departments for misconduct, and
He was talking about the blue wall. Yeah. Blue wall of silence. Yes, it really exists. It exists. It's absolutely. It is very, very, very hard for a working cop to say things against what's going on. That's one of the reasons that we allow people to join us if they're law enforcers or they're politicians who might get fired or not voted back into office. We allow them to join us on what we call a stealth program, where we guarantee that we will never release anybody's name unless they tell us it's okay. The only names that we release are speakers and board members and our staff that are working with us. And when people do something wrong, when cops do something wrong, police are expected not to say anything. Expected, absolutely expected. You remember, any of you see that movie, Serpico?
Yep.
Serpico's about a New York City cop, Frank Serpico. It's probably one of the closest movies to life I've ever experienced in my life. I worked with those folks back then.